Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes. I see there's still a couple of people joining the meeting, so we don't want them to miss any information. So we're just going to give them another couple of minutes for everybody to get settled.
I'm in now.
Just, is this right? Just have a look here.
Morning, everybody that joined. We're just giving people a little bit more time to join. I see they're still dripping in. We've got quite a big attendance today, so just give it a couple of more minutes. You guys are more than welcome to chat amongst yourselves in the chat room, Salon. All right. Good morning, guys. Welcome to our first, we call it lunch and learn session. So I'm very excited to see so many people joining, and I see they're still coming in drips and drabs. This is our first kind of lunch and learn session that we are presenting to our customer base. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You guys would have noticed we sent you all a Uber Eats voucher in your mail this morning. It should have arrived at around 7 o'clock this morning. If you haven't seen it yet, you're more than welcome to place your order there. If you want to leave that for later this evening, that's all fine as well. Hope you guys enjoy the lunch with us. We are going to have a question and answer session a bit later in the the session as well. So you guys are more than welcome to post any questions. You'll see there is a Q&A tab on the top of your screen. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to put it in just in the chat as well, and we'll address those questions towards the end of the presentation. So just a quick introduction on my side. My name is Petri van Zyl from Dial Nerd. I'm the managing executive. I've been with the company for about 15 years. So I'm very happy to see that we've got so many of familiar names and faces that I've dealt with over the years as well. We've started this initiative because we realized that, you know, a lot of these conversations we're having regularly with our managed service customers, you know, around IT strategies, systems, etc., etc. But this information is not necessarily always readily available to our very loyal customer base that just use us, you know, from time to time on a reactive basis. And, you know, ultimately, you guys need this information as much as, you know, any other customer of ours. So we thought it would be good to have these sessions on an ongoing basis. So please keep an eye out for future events around, you know, other topics that is topical and important for us to have. And hopefully we can equip you with enough information to make, you know, educated decisions at the end of the day. So our first topic is actually quite a topical, you know, conversation. It is around data retention in the Microsoft Cloud and the Google Cloud. I know that there's a lot of misconceptions and confusion around, you know, the security of your data once it is in the Microsoft Cloud. And, you know, I think it's a very important topic to discuss. So without taking up too much more time, I want to introduce you guys to Jock Smith from Acronis, who's our strategic partner when it comes to backups, to give you guys a little bit more context and insight into, you know, what happens with your data in the cloud and how secure it is, and what measures you can take to secure that even further. So Jock, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you very much, Petri. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I know it's a slightly chilly Cape Town day here today, so I'm dialing in from Cape Town. That wasn't obvious. And yeah, I think based on the topic of what Petri said, Microsoft 365 and Google Workspaces is just one of those things that have sort of accelerated the adoption of SaaS services, if you want to call it that. So, I mean, realistically, once upon a time, we as small businesses and industry and everyone within the space didn't have the capabilities that a platform that like Microsoft Office and Google Workspaces provided, being enterprise grade quality email and communication and backup services that they were having. And I think one of the critical things that we found nowadays is that there is, as Petri mentioned, a misconception behind where the responsibility sits with regards to who looks after your data. And I think with that, we'll jump into a section here so we can start giving you guys a bit of a rundown of the details. There we go. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is why every business needs to back up their Microsoft 365. Now we're talking exclusively about, well, you'll see exclusively Microsoft 365 data here, but the images and a lot of the workloads and the things that we can talk about translate directly to to the Google Workspaces platform too. So what is Microsoft 365? So just a quick check, if anyone can just drop in their chat quickly, who of you are currently utilizing the full suite of Microsoft 365? And when I say the full suite, we're talking about their online, their email services, their business OneDrive, their Teams, and their SharePoint. Can we just get a quick show of hands or a quick comment there in the chat? You can just let us know so we know. Hey, there we go. Doug says, yes, we are. We've got lots of hands going up. There we go. More hands, more hands, more hands. Okay, great. So I'm not going to go into too much detail behind what is Microsoft. I don't work for Microsoft, though I do love the work that they do because it gives me a job at the end of the day, backing up the data that they're generating. So it's one of the, if not the fastest productivity tool set. And if you remove the word productivity, it's one of the fastest online platform growths that we've seen in history of mankind. This is bigger than Facebook, bigger than Google. First time when ChatGPT became a thing back in 2023, 2022. All of these platforms, all of these applications that we can call them, started accelerating in usage. Microsoft 365 has not stopped. And according to the last statistics that we looked at, they have well over almost 500 million individual users that are currently using the Microsoft 365 suite. What that means is that there is a massive amount of data, and I'm sure we've all heard it whenever we've spoken or whenever we've been to a presentation of any IT where they talk about the exponential growth within data, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, the question that we have to start asking ourselves is, who is protecting this data? Who is looking after this data? And more importantly, where does the responsibility lie in protecting this data? And that's what we're going to delve into a little more detail here today. So the wide adoption of it has obviously shown us that it is growing in popularity. Everyone is using it, but we are leaving gaps within that environment. And those gaps are ultimately a risk to you as a business. So to critically understand where the shared responsibility model sits, this little slide that we've put together just gives you a good identifier. Where does Microsoft's responsibility sit? So very clearly, Microsoft tells you, we look after your infrastructure uptime. So M365, Azure, all of these services that Microsoft provide across the board is where their responsibility sits. They also have the responsibility of the servicing, setup, and management of this, the data replication, if you're using something like a geo-redundancy with them, and access control. And ultimately, the physical security of the data centers that they use is all sitting in their responsibility space. Now, where the mind shift needs to go is that not everything is looked after by Microsoft. And when we say not everything, this is where your responsibility as a business owner or a user of the Microsoft 365 platform comes in. So things like data security and protection, these are critical points that you need to look after. Endpoint management is also something that you need to manage. Your account management. Most of you use Microsoft will know that as a global admin within your Microsoft, you essentially have full control of your entire Microsoft 365 environment. And these are things that start asking the questions about compliance, and where compliance is a must, especially with things like your GDPR and your POPI regulations, as well as your private and personal information protection, healthcare information. All of these type of things start asking questions behind where is your responsibility and where is Microsoft's responsibility. And just for clarity, this is not a bashing of Microsoft. This is a very clear statement in their terms of use and in their end user license agreement. You can go into their Microsoft service agreement, you can check under section 6B, and it'll very clearly state that they are not responsible for your data from a certain point, and that it is your responsibility as a user of the M365 platform to be backing up and protecting your data. That's just a little clarity on what it is from a responsibility perspective that sits in your lap and how that extends into what Microsoft does versus what you guys do. Now, by taking a closer look at why utilizing a managed service provider like Dialinode is critical, is because at the end of the day, most of us are not involved in the day-to-day usage and the day-to-day management of your IT infrastructure. Most of you, I mean, maybe it'll be easy if we ask the question in reverse here. How many of you are actually IT businesses that manage your own environments? Let's see if there's a quick show of hands quickly. Let's see. No hands. One hand, two hands. Nope. There we go. Doug again. There we go. All right. So from an understanding perspective, this is exactly where the space for companies like Dialinode come into play. Their responsibility, their profession, their expertise lie in managing your services. And this is something that is very difficult for an end user to have, especially because we've got all of these great tools in the 365 product suite. Things like Teams, things like SharePoint, things like having an online email service that can store all of your data. But ultimately, again, the responsibility of managing that and handling that starts coming down to, okay, where is my responsibility? Who handles what? And this is the critical part behind the partnership that Acronis is working with on Dialinode side of things to help not only educate you guys as end users, but ultimately to protect you. Because very often a case of losing an email to most people in an everyday existence is not a train smash. But I'll give you a good example. I was working with a partner here in South Africa a few years ago. And what happened with this partner was something completely unrelated to a cybersecurity incident, where they had a mass failure of their security system within their data center. And what that failure was an electrical short that then sparked a fire within their data center. The fire suppression system kicked in and naturally drenched everything in their data center and the entire building with water, thus shutting down their entire infrastructure. Now, the problem that they were having, and what ultimately was the result of not being able to manage their data retention and keep it offsite, was that they lost the capability to not only send emails, but to access any data within their organization at the time of that fire. And they were under the impression that, yes, we have a backup policy. We have 2 copies of our data. We have one in a rack on this side, and we have one in a rack on that side. Now, anyone who's been in GRC or in the compliance side of things would have heard the rule of 3-2-1 when it comes to backup. Having 3 copies of your data, one of those is production, a second one is an offsite, and a third one is a different medium to the production and offsite copy. Now, had they followed this process, it would have been far easier for them to say, cool, we can just go back and revert to all of the data that we've already stored offsite and get up and running in the short term. Subsequently, because they weren't able to do this restore in the shortest possible time and all of their backup data, they were incurring a loss at that financial year of 52 million rand. And we're not talking about a massive multi-corporate here. We were talking about a legal firm that was affected by this through an idea that they had in managing their own IT infrastructure in their environment. And again, there's lots of pros and cons to managing it yourself, but ultimately it becomes a cost factor. How much money are you willing to invest? And this is something that the Acronis platform is trying to simplify, and through the management services that Dialonode offer, ultimately give you that best experience when it comes to A, is my data protected? Yes. Where is my data protected? And being able to give you the transparency and being able to report on it regularly to tell you if your compliance is that you must keep X amount of data or X amount of copies or have an extended retention policy for your data, then the Dialonode team is able to facilitate that with you. So if we take a look a little more detail, things like data loss, we just mentioned now, hardware failures, software glitches, malicious actions from a disgruntled employee, or maybe an advanced persistent threat or an outside actor getting into your environment. These are all things that can cause data loss. Some of them are cyber related, some of them are non-cyber related. But then you have to ask yourself the question, how are we being protected from that? Now, that's the first thing that Acronis will help you guys with. We're able to facilitate that that data will remain backed up and accessible to you at any time. The other part of it is malware and ransomware attacks. So this is very cyber related. This is another tool set that the Acronis platform allows you to do. We have malware and ransomware and anti-ransomware and anti-malware solutions provided within the Acronis backup solution for Microsoft 365 as well as Google Workspaces. So again, you're able to help with that. Security breaches. So there was a story once upon a time, if anyone's familiar with SolarWinds, about the supply chain attack that got hit, that was perpetrated through SolarWinds and their software. Now, again, this is not something that you can always go, yes, we're protected against this, but you need to take mitigating factors into play in order to prevent something like a security breach, i.e. somebody accessing your data through a secondary party or through a supply chain breach and being able to access your accounts. Now, all of a sudden, from a global admin account, they can take over that and completely erase all of your data, and you wouldn't know anything about it. The key factor is, did you have a backup? How long is it going to take you to restore from the point that you believe you need to restore to, and how quickly can you get up and running? These are all factors that you need to take into consideration. So compliance violations. All of the things that we mentioned here very often fall into the end user or into the end customer space, where it is compliance, whether it is something from a healthcare perspective, whether it's something from a private or personal information perspective, something as a little more advanced when it comes to credit card details, banking details, accounts that companies would have registered with you, debit orders, things like this. These are all compliance violations that you could suffer from should you not have the correct procedures put into place in order to mitigate a lot of this. And I think the last one, which everyone is probably very common with, and this is service interruptions. We've all seen it before, and we've seen it most recently a few weeks ago, where massive service interruptions hit Microsoft. And sadly, all of their services went offline for many customers around the world. Entire airlines were shut down, shipping companies were shut down. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how reliant are you in leaving that data with just one party? And this is where the problem and the risk comes in with going, okay, I've got everything in Microsoft, let's leave it at that. Things like being able to limit your, being able to manage your retention policy. How much of your data do you need to keep, and how long do you need to keep that data for? This is not a responsibility of Microsoft. This is the responsibility for either your service provider to adjust with you, or for you to make the call on what needs to be done. Also, the backing up of everything. How much of it do you need to back up? Are you only backing up critical files and folders? Or some organizations utilizing things like SharePoint and Microsoft Teams and email find that they only keep their critical information in their emails. And that is, again, a high-risk scenario. What if that service now goes down and you're not able to access your Microsoft 365 tenant? How are you going to get to that data? How are you going to get that contract that was signed? How are you going to get that compliance document that needs to be completed by X date when your big vendor tells you we don't have an uptime ETA, so we just have to hold on? So these are all questions behind what it is from a risk perspective that needs to be taken into consideration. And ultimately, the decision lies with you on how much of that risk are you willing to take. And I'm being in the field for almost 20 years now. I know that in the IT space and at the end user space, I've seen it in two spaces. You've actually seen it in industry where maybe your core focus as a business is not IT related, but I can tell you that the core behind getting your business done is very IT related. Many of you can probably think to yourself, what happens if I don't get emails for one day? I think I'm on holiday, but that's a different story. So these are the questions that you need to answer, and this is what the Acronis platform is looking to provide for you guys. How are we doing it? By giving you data control and visibility. So ultimately, you stay in control of your data. And by handing over that responsibility to a managed service provider like Dial-A-Nerd, it makes your life far simpler. Being able to take your hands off something that is costing you from a risk perspective or in a risk assessment scenario, being able to alleviate that and give it over to an expert that knows what they're doing when it comes to that managed services. So being able to do data control and visibility is the first thing that we do. Simplicity and scalability. We simplify the protection and the management of your backups by allowing you to do it as a single all-in-one platform that Acronis can provide, and protecting your things like Teams, being able to protect your SharePoint, your OneDrive for Business, as well as all your emails is the first thing that you can do. Handover, easy, and it is scalable. We have yet to find a limit to the amount of Microsoft tenants that we can look after, and we're currently managing just in excess of 500,000 across the African continent. Rapid recovery. So backup is backup is backup. But the question is, how quickly can you access the data that you are storing and backing up if for whatever reason you need to access it? Your retention policy with Microsoft is now weaned over. You are now creating regular backups. Which backup do you need access to? How soon do you need it? So this is part of what we have with an easy recovery solution that we can provide. And ultimately, it is very cost effective. And when we say cost effective, something as simple as saying, we have one product that covers the email, it covers the Teams, it covers your OneDrive, and it covers your SharePoint. That's it. Simple, easy to understand, and it's all on a per user basis. And just to give you those additional protection layers, everyone might have heard of the term defense in depth. And this is critical when it comes to not only your backups, but it also comes to your cybersecurity needs. There is no silver bullet for cybersecurity. It has to be a multi-layered approach. And how we start that multi-layered approach is that we have backup and data protection. This is where you back up your data, being able to access it at any time and having it being independent from your existing platforms is the key. Being able to restore it as quickly as possible, having access to it, being able to read that data in the shortest period possible. This is all part of the Acronis philosophy behind your M365 as well as Google Workspace protection. We also offer additional services which are simplifying the system. So we're not going to touch too much here, but we can give you email security and data loss prevention protocols. We have our patented anti-ransomware and our vulnerability assessments. So being able to stop ransomware attacks and find unpatched applications that are a known weakness on the internet. For any of you that are not familiar with this, what happens is generally ethical hackers would go dig around software and they would try to break into the software. And it's an ethical obligation, once they find some kind of weakness within their environment, to inform those particular vendors, whether it is Microsoft, whether it is Adobe, whether it is one of the many other vendors that you can find in the IT software space. It's an ethical obligation for them to inform you. What they don't share with you further down the line is that should that vendor not take action in order to improve that security flaw, that hacker has an ethical obligation to then share it with the world. And the time frame is only for about 2 weeks. So in essence, what is happening is if you have a weakness within any software suite in your product stack, and your vendor is not taking the appropriate actions to go correct this weakness, that vulnerability gets put out onto the internet. And once it's out there, it's out there. And it's just a case of somebody having to find out, maybe even by coincidence, that you are utilizing a particular set of software that has a particular version number, and being able to tell you, I know exactly how to exploit your environment because there it is. It's on the internet. Didn't have to try very hard. It's not dark web. I don't have to pay for it. It is, again, an ethical obligation in the cybersecurity space to put that type of information out on the internet to make it a safer space for all of us. Vulnerability assessment is one of the things that we can help in order to see not only in your environment software what is outdated, but also allow you to go, yes, I now need to update the software as soon as possible. So again, just that multiple layers of defense layered on top of each other in order to create that defense in depth motion. We also have endpoint management, so proactively avoiding downtime, being able to monitor hard drive failures, being able to monitor the device for spikes in usage like CPU and RAM usage. Again, multi-layered approach to it. And then ultimately your endpoint security. Everyone's heard about anti-malware, antivirus systems. Acronis can provide these solutions for you too, specifically in the M365 space, but also at the endpoint space, should you need it for your Windows, your Mac, or your Linux environments. And this is the advantages of having it through Dialinode, being able to use their expertise and their specializations. This is what they do. This is their core function in life. Their only purpose is their business is to look after your IT infrastructure. By utilizing tools like the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud product stack and being able to apply that to your Microsoft, to your Google, to your Windows, to your Mac, to your Linux environments, this is what they do, and this is where the performance and the optimization comes in, because they do it every single day. They've become proficient at it, and this is the reason why they've gone into business doing it. They also supply monitoring and support. Again, taking one thing out of your lap again that you don't need to worry about, being able to get regular reports, being able to ask them for up-to-date real-time reporting. This is all part of that management stack that they can give you. Cost efficiencies. So ultimately, they are able to provide it at mass. Why a single end user came to me, unfortunately, the pricing for the Acronis product set would be probably too high for them. But because Dialinode have such a good relationship and are working with us as a strategic partner, they get that preferential pricing, and in turn, they can increase the amount of usage that they have and ultimately give you a very cost-effective solution that they can provide to you as an end user. All the advanced tools and resources that they provide, all of these things are just an additional. They aren't only an Acronis house. They have many other tool sets and many other proficiencies that they can provide for you guys in the managed services space. And this all helps you meet up with your compliance and your security needs, whether it is things like GDPR, whether it's POPI, whether it's HIPAA, all of these compliance requirements that come into play is what the Dialinode team can assist you with. And ultimately, it's going to save you a lot of time. No longer do you need to personally worry about your IT infrastructure when you can hand it over to an expert team that is able to facilitate that and facilitate it at scale for you. And that's the end of my story. I'm going to drop it over there and hand it over to you, Petri.
Perfect. Thanks, Jacques. Very
Cool,
insightful.
pleasure.
Thank you very much. Guys, we don't want to make this a sales session at all. This is really just to provide you guys with relevant information. Inevitably, there is always, a commercial kind of, discussion afterwards, and people want to know, what they are looking at and how this is commercialized. Now, the truth of the matter is, Dialynet's not the only reseller of the Acronis 365 product. You can get this through many of the Acronis vendors. What makes Dialynet kind of unique in a certain sense is that most providers provide the service on a per gig model. So depending on, regardless of how many users you have, it really comes down to how much data you have in the cloud. So, how much email you store, how much data is in your OneDrive, very importantly, how much information is in your SharePoint. And this is where we've seen a great kind of marriage between products, is specifically backing up the SharePoint environment, because there really isn't another product that does that for you. And SharePoint environments inherently, that's where we see the big data being stored. And a lot of people are moving off their local kind of servers, moving their file storage into the SharePoint environment. And the Acronis product actually backs that up. But, that usage over time, kind of expands and expands. And on the per gig backup model, like most cloud providers offer, it can become, fairly expensive. What's beautiful about the Acronis product that we have and make available to our customers is it's actually offered on a per seat Microsoft seat basis. So there is a fixed cost per Microsoft seat, and that is for unlimited storage. So regardless of how much data you have in your company, Acronis will back that up. There's not going to be any fluctuations in the cost. The only thing is, obviously, it will be dependent on how many Microsoft seats you have in the Microsoft environment. So you guys are more than welcome to reach out to us to have a more kind of in detail discussion around, the commercials around this. Just very briefly, we do make this available at 45 Rand per Microsoft seat. Acronis has also been very kind to allow us a 30-day trial for all of our customers signing up. So for the first month using the service, there will be no charges, just for you guys to see, inherently how it works. The implementation of that is very silent and very much in the background, and it's not going to impede any kind of operations. So if you guys are, if you guys want to, continue that conversation, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. Just, adding on to what Jacques said earlier, and some real world examples, to be honest with you, whenever it came to these kind of data retention issues with some of our existing customers, and understanding that we predominantly work in the SMB kind of, market, it's not, that often that we actually deal with, we call them bad actors, kind of hackers accessing your accounts, deleting data, etc., etc. What we've noticed is a lot of accidental deletion of data, especially in the SharePoint space, but then also, malicious data deletion from disgruntled employees. And the problem is Microsoft will only retain your data for a maximum of 90 days. After that period, if you haven't noticed that that data is missing, there's really no recourse. And that's where this Acronis product works beautifully and marries very well to that Microsoft 365 environment. So that's the only kind of salesy stuff that I wanted to mention to you guys. I want to actually open up the floor for questions and answers. Mel, I don't know if there was anything on the Q&A group.
Nothing on the Q&A group, but I do have some questions from clients that we could maybe cover. Just give me a second to quickly get them. I do know from the top of the head, one of them is, where is the data stored?
Good question. Yeah.
Very good question. So it all depends on where you need the data stored. One of the benefits we have from Acronis is that we currently own and operate 52 data centers globally, of which one of them is here in South Africa, and every one of the continents except Antarctica. But I'll give you a funny story there. So my boss is an Irishman, lives in the UK, and if South Africa win the World Cup one more time, apparently Acronis is going to open up a data center in Antarctica, and I get to be the GM of it. So I was like, that's a deal. I'll take it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and for most of our, the Dialonet customers, obviously, a lot of them have the POPIA requirement that the data needs to be stored locally within our borders. So most of our customers, unless there's a different requirement from them, is stored locally in the South African data center. So it ticks that POPIA compliance requirement.
Perfect, thank you. And then what is the comparison to Microsoft Security Suite?
Very good question on that one. So the Microsoft Security Suite as a standard on M365 is non-existent. So that's the first thing that a lot of people have to be aware of. They do have services that are there that they charge you an additional fee for, but I'm not one to bash the competitors once again, but you can take a look at the history of the last 20 years and the security failures that they've basically put forward, and you go, okay, who would you trust? Somebody who's dropped the eggs many times, or somebody who hasn't dropped the eggs before? So that's maybe a good comparison that I can use in there.
Yeah, also important to note that Microsoft only doesn't really play in the backup space of the data specifically unless you sign up for archiving, additional archiving, but that archiving also only covers your mail. So you actually have to, from a Microsoft perspective, they've got blob storage for the Azure environments, but you have to take a combination of different products to cover your entire Microsoft 365 suite, which through Acronis, we can cover through one product. Similar with other competitors like Mimecast. Mimecast also great in the archiving space, but limited to kind of email.
Well, thank you. And then just the last one was how reputable is Acronis?
Very good question. Very good question. So Acronis started 20 years ago. We were actually founded in 2003. The very foundation of what we do when it comes to data protection is not strictly in the backup space, but again, it started 20 years ago. This is where a lot of people are familiar with the Acronis brand, and they probably would know the word true image connected to it. That's where we came from, where it was data protection. And obviously, this is now built up over 20 years and going, well, if we're talking about data protection, and now I use the word data protection and not backup, is because that is the philosophy behind the Acronis platform and what it is as a brand and as a company that we're trying to achieve. It is complete end-to-end data protection. And in that turn, over the last 10 years, we've started migrating beyond just the backups, just the disaster recovery, but anything in the cybersecurity space. Things like email security, things like DLP, things like endpoint security, whether it's EDR, XDR, MDR solutions. That's all part of the philosophy of what Acronis is trying to achieve at a global data protection perspective. Now, having said that, a lot of guys go, okay, but where's the proof? So the advantage is that we have been thoroughly tested by all the independent third parties. This is not a pay to play. You don't go to someone and they tell you, well, if you give me $50,000, I'll write a nice article about you. Acronis is very anti that. So one of the things that we do is that we put it out there saying if anybody wants it, we're willing to give you a copy and you can run the free trials. And through that, we've been tested by all the major third-party corporations, whether it was IDC, whether it was Gartner, whether it was Frost & Sullivan. All of them have tested us and checked us. You also look at AV Test, AV Comparative, the ICSA Labs, SE Labs. All of these ratings are readily available on the internet and you can go and find them. And very often we end up in the top 3, top 5 out of 80 to 100 different vendors that are out there. So from a reputable perspective, it's not for me to say, oh yeah, I've got a great brand. I work here. I have a passion for the product. I have a passion for what it is we do. But the proof is in what do other people see and how do we rate as a product when it comes to that space?
Awesome, thank you. So there's some great questions in the chat. So Doug asks, if Microsoft 365 goes down for 1 week, would we still be able to access our emails using your product?
Good question, Doug. So, I mean, if Microsoft is providing the email, you cannot access your emails anymore. That's the limitation behind Microsoft. They are giving you that online email server or exchange, and that is the service that they're providing to you. The benefit of backing up that data is that if you are only trying to get hold of that data through your M365 portal, and that could be across any browser, the answer is no, you're not going to be able to get it. And why backing up is critical is because you will be able to, independent of Microsoft, access that Microsoft 365 data, even to an extent that we offer it in a way that if that user on your 365 seat no longer is a user within your Microsoft tenant, you can still back up that data, and you as an organization will have access to it as long as you've determined your retention policy needs to be. That is the time frame that you will still be able to access it. So does that answer your question there, Doug? We'll take that as a yes.
He says
yeah, there we go.
thanks.
Gotcha.
Cool. And then Noxolo's got a nice long one. You should be able to unmute, but if you aren't, sorry, Noxolo, because I did see I haven't disabled your mic, but I'm going to read this out.
I've read through it, so let me respond to that quickly. It's more of a Microsoft 365 question. Not so, yeah, there is an inherent difference between the family package of Microsoft 365 and their business suite. First of all, the family package is not, for commercial use, and it also doesn't have that Microsoft email business service. So it pretty much works on a kind of a POP system. So it might be a setting kind of thing if you have an Outlook client on your laptop. Obviously this is stuff that we deal with on a daily basis, and very happy to assist you with that. But there is also a much larger conversation around the Microsoft 365 for Business suites, and I know it's definitely on the list of our future topics. So please tune in and keep an eye out for those invites in future. Is that it, Mel? Do we have any other questions?
No, that's it.
I don't know if anybody wants to take a last stab at any questions in the chat on the Q&A. No? All good. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it from us then. Jock, thank you very much for your, taking part in this and giving us very insightful information. I hope that our customers, kind of have some more useful information. If there is any further questions, if you guys would like to have a more in-detail conversation around the product and how, it incorporates into your business, we understand that every business is a little bit different than others, and, people have different requirements. If you're still unclear about, the product as a service, let us know. Like I mentioned, Acronis has been very, happy to implement this at a month's free charge if you sign up for the service as well as a POC. So reach out to us if you guys would like any further information. And you guys can contact us either on my direct email address, p3v@dialenerd.co.za. I'll put it in the chat here as well. Otherwise, you can use our normal sales channel, which is sales@dialenerd.co.za, and somebody will get in contact with you guys to set up a bit of a discussion and see, work out how we're going to work with it going forward. Alrighty, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you guys all got your lunch. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. If not, enjoy it later. Thank you much for joining. I think this has been a very successful first session, and please keep an eye out for future events that we will be sending out. And would be happy to see you guys there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Stay well.